This story started in Seoul, South Korea, and the typing was saying that Seoul had entrusted its future to one single person. This place was full of dust and smoke, and the ground was also cracking into multi-pieces. This is Jang Ch-1, the guild master of Manhwa. He was out of breath and looked like beaten up. Not only him but also other people were beaten up to death or pass out by a single person who was standing a few distance away. People were horrified by that scene and they even couldn't believe their eyes. A person spat out the blood from his mouth and said finally it was just he and him, and the only ones left. He is the public enemy of the world, Shin Kang-gu. Jang Ch-1 tried to stand up from the ground and told him everyone was suffering because of that meaningless fight that Shin Kang-gu started, and because of evil like him, he shouted while gathering the reddish-colored light in his hand. But Shin Kang-gu replied, "What a joke. What did he think he was?" As if he was a messenger of justice. Shin-1 got angry that he even dared to speak of justice, and he was fighting on behalf of everyone. He replied with a massive force of power in his hand. Kang-gu was always standing in his way, and if he wasn't an evil then what the hell he was, Shin-1 shouted angrily. As soon as person watching nearby heard that, they started shouting Jang Ch-1 and cheering on him. Their voices were louder and louder, and gave Ch-1 a confidence to fight again. As long as they cheered for him, he wouldn't be taken down at any cost, he said with confidence, and shot at Kang-gu with fast and powerful skill. Kang-gu didn't have time to dodge, so he prepared to take the hit. There was a huge explosion covering with thick smoke, and some people had to run away from it. After a few moments the smoke were gone, and the scene was clear again. This time the world's enemy Shin Kang-gu was already on knees in front of Shin-1, and couldn't stand up. The blood were falling down from his head and mouth. When people finally got a clear view, they cheered up for Shin-1 with a bright smile and joy on their faces, and that they had always believed in him. And request Shin-1 to end that rascal. Everyone was started to shout to kill Kang-gu. The words kill him were echoed through that silent place. Jang Ch-1 told Kang-gu, not a single person wished for him to live on. He started casting another skill again. Kang-gu tried to move, but he was in the worst condition to even stand up. This was his end, as Ch-1 said. He shot his skill. It bursted out Kang-gu's whole right hand and forced him out to a far distance. And his vision became blurry. A pair of feet was jumped into the air. It was Jang Ch-1. He told people joyfully that all of their preparations had finally borne fruit. The perfect freedom shall descend upon that land. He snapped his fingers while gathering another power to cast. People were swept away in his words, and even some of them worshipped him like a god. Ch-1 cast a skill. Then all the sky slowly turned into red and an immense range of hole appeared. After that a giant terrifying hand slowly approached to humans. All people were frozen in fear for a moment, but Ch-1 was grinning satisfyingly. As the hand near to the ground, all people were scared and ran away in panic. Ch-1 shouted that the demon king had descended, then the true peace shall. He stopped when he heard trembling voice, saying that it was more like true tyranny. It was Shin Kang-gu. Jang Ch-1 was startled. How was he still alive? And shouted to open his eyes wide and take a look at the world that was his creation. And just like that, the world had perished. Then a notification appeared saying that thanks for all the love that they had shown so far for the life of a villain-turned-savior novel. But the writer has already known that the reader's expectations had been crushed. Because that story protagonist, Jang Ch-1, was a henchman of the Demon King. And he and his comrades, the 13 stars, were top-level, long-standing evils. But this fiction was a mirror, reflecting reality. That story theme was the writer's own life as a student, and that was the time he saw the authority that could cover up school violence, and power that could overturn good and evil. For that reason he incorporated that reality in the novel, but all he got back was hateful comments complaining about the ending. He guessed it couldn't be helped that if they didn't believe. Then he shut the comment page off and threw himself on the bed, and covered his eyes with his arm. But he felt vexed every time he thought about those comments. Then he told himself that he should just sleep and closed his eyes. After a while, he heard noises. So he tried to open his eyes. Now he saw clearly. That place looked like a mining. And he was also lying on the stone floor. Then he heard shouting, that how he dared despite Eclipse's grace. The word eclipse was suddenly caught our writer's interest. But he saw one person was beaten up to the ground and was being kicked really hard. That image made our writer to remember the similar image of his friend from his school life. He remembered that clearly as day in his friend's face that had already cowered in fear with dead eyes. Our writer thought they were even showing up in his dream too now. The man grabbed the shirt collar of the one on the ground and about to punch him. Our writer shouted not to go too far. He was halted by that instant voice. But not even him, everyone who heard that voice were stopped and looked at the way of the voice. Footsteps were coming closer to our writer. That was the man who was beating up someone a while ago. He said he has been wondering who it was, with a composure of clenching his fist that was ready to punch. Then he beat our writer up, saying that he was the fucking retrad who couldn't even last 1 second. Our writer was confused by the pain he was receiving now. He thought this was a dream, but why it hurt even in the dream. Someone pulled the man who was punching and told him to stop, and our writer has got a long way from meeting his quota. But our writer couldn't hear them clearly cause he was still in shock because it felt extremely real, and started to doubt that if this was really a dream. That man spat at near the writer's foot and said he was going to pick a day and beat him up, with dark glares. Someone asked our writer that if he, Kengo, was okay. It was the person who had been beating up a while ago, and has the same appearance as his high school friend. When he was called by the name Kengo, he couldn't believe, stood up immediately and looked for the water nearby. He could suddenly feel mana. So he tried to absorb surrounding mana, and he could tell right away that it was definitely congenital mana hypersensitivity. Then he looked into the water. He was so shocked by the appearance that was found that he became the villain in his novel, Shinkenga. He sighed and thought, why Shinkenga of all people, and also his friend was still alive, so that was around 5 years before the ending. He had possessed Ch-1, and had been revered as the world's hero. But if this world was still the same as in his novel, this world would end with the Demon King descending and only henchmen would survive. If he didn't change the ending, he would also die a pathetic death. But he stood up confidently, 'cause he knew the way to escape from these situations.